Judge Juan the Con Mercan continues to bury evidence in the Trump prosecution. We're going to take a look at a new order that came out, which is quashing Trump's subpoena. Trump sent a demand and a subpoena over to this guy, Mark Pomerantz, and said, hey, Mark, remember, you used to be prosecuting me. And as part of the prosecution team, some of your evidence, some of the investigatory techniques, the materials, your memos, all the things you did should be a part of the government's case. And some of that might be discoverable if we're asking about prosecutorial misconduct and how you might have rigged the prosecution. So they're saying, we want to go get access to some of those things. Were you using a separate personal cell phone so that you didn't have to keep your investigatory mechanisms on the record? Were you using a personal email address like Hillary Clinton and these types of things? And we know that this guy is a little bit nervous about some of that because he is now pleading the fifth. So here was a nice exchange from Matt Gaetz. This is a former prosecutor of Donald Trump, was working on this case, resigned like a crybaby, wrote a big whiny resignation letter, said, I'm leaving the office because Alvin Bragg won the election, looked at this crap case, decided not to prosecute it. So he resigned. Matthew Colangelo came over from the White House, took his place, and the case got back on track because Colangelo cattle prodded Alvin Bragg.
Do you respect Alvin Bragg?
Same answer.
Fifth Amendment.
Going to answer your question about how often I was physically at the offices of the Manhattan District Attorney.
Have your own desk there?
Again, I'm not going to respond to your question.
On the basis of what?
Basis of the fifth paragraph of my statement. Conveniently, Mr. Castor, the fifth paragraph relates to the Fifth Amendment. So,
since you've left the employ of the Manhattan VA, do you use
email
as a method of communication?
I decline to answer your question.
Who's your current email provider?
I decline to answer that question as well.
On the Fifth Amendment ground?
Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to be pedantic, I'm just trying to make the record.
No, I understand that.
And
I appreciate that.
Who's your current cell phone provider?
Likewise, I refuse to answer that question on the basis of my rights under the Fifth Amendment.
Doesn't want to talk about his answers or his providers because he's a prosecutor. Of course, feels a little bit weird. I thought he was doing justice this whole time. Is he now worried about criminality? So Trump was looking into that. They submitted a subpoena. They said, we want access to those materials. And the judge, Juan the Con Mercan, has now come out and denied that order. They say, here's the deal. Trump, of course, as we know, was arraigned and then got a subpoena. The people filed a motion to quash the subpoena. They said, you don't have a right to go after our prosecutor. And then this guy, Roberto Finzi, is all now representing the former prosecutor. And here's the ruling. They say you can get a subpoena. The Court of Appeals has held that a subpoena is properly quashed when they demonstrate a lack of relevancy or materiality. Can't get one. And so a lot of this is just the law. So here's what the judge said in response. He says, so for the following reasons, Alvin Bragg, Matthew Colangelo's motion to quash the subpoena is granted. So you don't get to go get any information from him. They say he was a special assistant district attorney from February 2nd until February 2022, so for a full year. And the subpoena is seeking material from his time as a prosecutor, with some requests seeking materials up to a month after his departure. Now, the request seeking documents go from a certain time period, and because the subpoena doesn't comply with this rule, it is quashed. Now, as an alternate holding, saying, assuming that they did comply with the rules, the people's motion would still be granted. Why? Because the first request is too broad. It calls for information protected as privileged work product, which includes prosecutorial misconduct on private cell phones and private emails. This request seeks all documents related to a memo about Stormy Daniels and whether Trump was a victim of blackmail. In the memo, the court finds that this request is too broad. The prosecutor's work includes those portions of the documents which are only the legal research, opinions, or conclusions, as well as topics like legal analysis related to the criminal investigation. Now, defendant's second and third requests are again far too broad to amount to an improper fishing expedition. And so Trump's second request seeking all documents for that period about any animosity or bias towards Trump is just too broad. And many of these things have already been turned over. And finally, Trump's fourth request seeks information on topics that are not even relevant. It seeks information about communications with personnel about Discovery, and it appears to be an attempt to obtain their internal communications about Discovery. It's about their external, internal communications. It's about the stuff that's not on the record. And so the judge, of course, grants the motion to quash the subpoena. He's no longer with the DA's office. He's totally protected. He's pleading the fifth, and Trump can't do anything about it. And so this judge continues to issue bad ruling after bad ruling. One guy who is commenting on a lot of this is Jonathan Turley. You know who he is, another very experienced attorney, familiar with these types of cases, walking us through how bad Stormy's testimony was and how the judge's handling of this case might be something that leads to reversible error.
Well, it should concern you, although I'm not too sure you're right about the immateriality. In a case built on 2 dead misdemeanors, talking to the dead might be just the skill set you need as a witness. This case itself died years ago and was sparked back into life with this bizarre theory. But we still don't even know the full extent of the theory because we don't know what actually is the crime that Trump was supposed to be concealing.
It's a choose your own adventure. They can pick whatever they want.
Also revealed for the jury another interesting contradiction. You have all of this discussion of his signing the checks in the White House. So it really sort of drove home this theory that he somehow falsely denoted the payments after the election to influence the election. So the election was already over, he already won, and he classified them as legal expenses, and somehow retroactively that was stealing the election. It's that convoluted. Problem that I have is not that the jury can't disregard of what they've heard. They can't disregard all of it. I'm sure the judge is going to come in and say, please forget you heard some of those details, which is not going to happen. But she lacks such credibility. I'm hoping they see that. The problem is that the judge has already committed, in my view, reversible error before Daniels ever took the stand. He allowed the government to repeatedly say that there were campaign violations in this case. For all they know, Donald Trump did commit a campaign election finance violation. That's just not true.
Yeah.
And that itself, I think, could end up a reversible error.
Yeah. And remember, we talked about the article, the document from Hillary Clinton's case, where she just settled her campaign violation with just a fine. So even if it was a campaign violation, the fact that it evolved or devolved into a criminal prosecution is just, again, outside of the standard norms in our justice system. They are targeting Trump because he's Trump. And so we're going to be here continuing to cover this. Not a surprise. Another corrupt prosecutor is very likely going to escape any sort of culpability for his involvement in this case, but we'll be here continuing to cover this one and more. Thank you for subscribing, my friends. Thanks for also checking out our members only communities. You can join us on Locals, watching thewatchers.locals.com, or right on YouTube. Click to become a membo over there. We do live streams in the mornings and on Saturdays. We'd love to have you come join us for some of the membo only content. We'll see you over there and back here on the next one.